Final lesson for this morning comes from Exodus chapters 32 and 33. It can be found on pages 66 and 67 in your copy of the story. The next day Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin, but now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. But now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." The Lord replied to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go before you. However, when the time comes for me to punish, I will punish them for their sin." And the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron had made. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Leave this place, you and the people you brought up out of Egypt, and go up to the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel before you and drive out the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you, because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way." Moses said to the Lord, "You have been telling me, 'Lead these people,' but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, 'I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways, so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people.' The Lord replied, 'My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest.' Then Moses said to him, 'If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?' The Lord said to Moses, 'I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you, and I know you by name.' Then Moses said, 'Now show me your glory.'" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen. I believe what we are finding this week is that the relationship between God and the people Israel, the nation of Israel, is beginning to change. They're entering a new phase in their relationship, a new phase in the way they behave and act toward each other. I struggled a bit in how to describe this change of attitude, this change of phase, this new relationship that they're entering together. And the image that came to mind was the honeymoon. You see, in the relationship of a couple, things before the honeymoon change after the honeymoon. The relationship changes. The way we act with each other changes. The reality of life being lived together changes from before the honeymoon to afterwards. What am I talking about? Date nights. Before the honeymoon, couples can go on dates. And at the end of the date, each one goes to their own home. After the honeymoon, they go home together. Dinner out. Dinner out is a nice thing, especially before the honeymoon. Some of you may enjoy dinner out even after the honeymoon. But for many of us, those times are lessened. Dinner out is nice because they give you a menu and you have dozens of items to choose from. After the honeymoon, if you're eating at home, the selection is rather slim. I often tell my children, we have 2 things for dinner tonight. Take it or leave it. The reality is, after that choice, there are dishes to be done. There's nobody back in the kitchen to take care of those before I get up the next morning. Things change after the honeymoon. Time together before the honeymoon is less impacted by family and friends and work obligations. You see, before the honeymoon, a couple can carve out that time together. And they set aside work and family and friendships and dedicate time to one another. Whereas after the honeymoon, family and friends and work obligations impact life at home, and sometimes work even comes home, and we know the stresses that can bring to a relationship. After the Red Sea, God and Israel enter a more mature relationship, perhaps described by that commitment of marriage between a husband and a wife. And the reality is this: when Israel and the Lord enter this more mature relationship, it has the potential to be more explosive than dynamic. And I fear sometimes that can happen in our own personal relationships too. Or if we try to maintain those pre-honeymoon behaviors after the honeymoon, sometimes misunderstandings can happen, expectations are not met, and relationships can become more explosive rather than dynamic. And so the key thought I want to share with you today is this: that healthy relationships are more dynamic than they are explosive. So Israel and the Lord need to figure out this new relationship that they have together. Israel and the Lord need to figure out, how is it that we're going to live together after the honeymoon? Not that everything had been going real well. They had already had their disagreements. Israel had already turned to Moses and said, "Let us go back." Remember that line from last week? Was it because there were not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us out here? The honeymoon for Israel and the Lord had not gone all that well. But even so, the relationship was maturing and needed some parameters. They needed some understanding so that they could live together in the years to come. And I think there are 3 keys to the way that Israel and the Lord were able to maintain a relationship that, yes, was dynamic, it was exciting, it was changing, but they also concentrated on reducing the explosiveness of that relationship. One way that they did this was by using the tablets, the 10 Commandments. Those tablets were a list of guidelines that were put in place so that Israel and the Lord knew better what their relationship would be. We went over just a few minutes ago what some of those expectations were. You will have no other gods before me. The Lord recognized that there were other gods to be worshipped, but he would not allow Israel to worship any of the other gods before the Lord. You will not worship any idols. You will not use the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath. And then turning to one another, God said, honor your father and mother. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if you abide by these rules, these standards, then our relationship will be easier maintained. While it will be dynamic, it will not be explosive because we have some mutual expectations and understandings of each other. You see, we need some of those same guidelines within marriages also. It starts with things that may seem a little mundane, like who's going to do the laundry And do the whites and colors need to be separated up in the bedroom, or does that happen down in the laundry room? Who's going to do the cooking and who's going to do the dishes? Who's going to put out the trash and who's going to pay the bills? Some of these expectations need to be worked out. And if you've been there, you understand. And it's always amazing to me when I meet with couples who are ready for their first marriage that sometimes they haven't realized that these are things that can get stuck in a marriage. Who's going to pay the bills? And will we have one bank account or two? And how does that all work? But when we set up these guidelines, when we're involved in communicating with each other, we can start to avoid the potential explosiveness and enjoy the dynamic of a wonderful relationship together.